Walker is an emotional and primitive man.
Do you remember when we met? Suddenly, we were together.
Lee Marvin is Walker, the hunter and the hunted.
You ever meet Walker?
He makes my flesh crawl.
What do you really want?
I really want my money. I want my 93 grand.
I want my money.
Even deserted Alcatraz Island is not immune to Walker's vengeance.
You're a very bad man, Walker, a very destructive man. Why do you run around doing things like this?
Feel the blast of emotions at point-blank range.
What do you want from me, Walker? You're supposed to be dead.
Know the mental agony that overwhelms and consumes at point-blank range. Experience rapid-fire action at point-blank range.
Things aren't done this way anymore, Walker. Let's be reasonable.
Welcome to an all-new episode of ReconCinemation. I'm your host, John Diner.
I'm David Munchak.
And I'm Brent Hutchins.
And this is the podcast that takes a look back at some of our favorite films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and actually sometimes the 60s, which is where we're going today. But you know what? It's been a great summer. We've had a great summer. There's no place I'd rather go on my summer vacation than Alcatraz. So welcome to Alcatraz August, guys.
Hey, thank you.
I never want to go on vacation with you.
It's roomy. It's it's not comfortable.
It's dusty. There's plenty of cobwebs.
There's lots of stories to be told.
That there is.
Yeah. So we're going to Alcatraz all month long with a couple of episodes, and we are going to start with a classic film. And that has a director and a lead actor that have not yet appeared on this show, which is John Boorman and Lee Marvin with 1967's Point Blank.
All right.
I can't wait to get into this.
We don't dive back into the 60s that often, but we're with our summer trip to Alcatraz coming up, we thought it would be the perfect time to do that, and we've got another one planned later this month. I'll let all of your imaginations just run wild with what that episode might be. But let's talk about Point Blank. I mean, this is a classic film right at the beginning of the Hollywood New Wave. I don't know if this is really categorized as part of that movement, but it definitely has its 60s vibe. But it's really a movie that's fascinating to me and very much, I think, forgotten in time. You don't hear much really outside of film schools. You really don't hear much spoken about with this one.
I mean, even in the 60s, I don't think it was very widely received, right? So it took a little time even for it to kind of catch an audience when it did get released.
Yeah, it wasn't like a blockbuster hit, and we'll talk about, it's coming right off of the heels of The Dirty Dozen, which was a much bigger movie, studio movie for Lee Marvin. But there's a lot of interesting stuff that went into this one. But really, I think it's probably my favorite Lee Marvin movie, and one of John Boorman's most creative for sure, of which he's had a wide variety of movies from this to Deliverance to The Exorcist 2 to Hell in the Pacific and Excalibur. You know, his career has kind of been all over the place, but this is a really interesting one. Have you guys seen this one, or was this a first time watch? David, what about you?
No surprise here that this is a first timer for me. I don't even know how aware of this, how aware I was of this film, but yeah. So this was a new adventure for me too. I don't even know if I've seen any Lee Marvin films. I must have. No, I must have.
Wow.
You've probably seen the Dirty Dozen, right?
The Dirty Dozen I've seen some of.
Delta Force?
Yeah, no.
Oh, we must change that soon.
Yeah. So, this was
backyard screening number 2 coming up.
There you go. So yeah, no, this was me diving into some new stuff. Yeah.
Brent, what about you? Did you catch this prior to this discussion?
I don't think I had. I was aware of it because I think, and you can definitely, you'll be able to tell me if I'm right about this, but I believe that this did play at the screen when we were in college, right? And so I was aware of it. I remember, it being around, but I hadn't seen it until just recently. And I wish I had seen it for the first time at the screen when we were in college and not this viewing now, because I think I probably would have, it would have resonated with me better. Like this time, didn't really land for a couple different reasons, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think if I'd have seen it in college, I would have liked it a lot more. I probably would have had a couple beers, probably would have been with friends, would have seen it 35 millimeter print, which is always a great way to see film. And so I wish I had experienced it there.
Yeah, well, you are 100% correct. And that's where I actually saw it for the first time. I don't think it didn't hit my radar till we got to college, and I saw in some interview segment, probably with John Borman, where they showed a clip of the movie, and it's the clip of Lee Marvin walking down the airport terminal, where his footsteps are just going and overlaying over everything, which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. But that was the first time it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, oh, I knew of Lee Marvin from the Dirty Dozen and a couple of other things, but it was like, this looks fascinating. This is a whole other side of him that I didn't know about. But yes, we did screen it at the Screen, which was the movie theater on campus, and I think I want to say I was managing at the time, because we played it. I remember playing on a weeknight, and I think I was actually off the clock, and I was going to go meet up with you guys wherever everyone was hanging out. And I was like, nah, let me just stay and check this out. It's been on my list. There's, it's 7:00 at night, so it's not like anything crazy fun is happening yet.
Right.
And I stayed in the theater and watched it on the big screen, and it blew my mind. It's the kind of movie that does make a difference seeing it on the big screen versus watching it at home.
Yeah,
sure. On that larger scale, it has such an impact that there's a lot of movies that are like that are made to see in a theater, and when you see it at home, it just doesn't have the same experience. So I saw it, and I was completely sucked into the movie. I was just totally absorbed, and the movie went by. It felt like 5 minutes, and the movie was over. And and then I became fascinated with Los Angeles, seeing the various scenery, the LA River Basin, and within a few months, then I had moved out there and was also working on a show that's shot in all those same places. But really, really fascinating for me. I loved it when I first saw it, and I'm still a fan of it now, although I can see why it would be difficult to kind of latch onto it from today's perspective. But
yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting, just the filmmaking approach in general, has evolved so much since this movie was made. And a lot of the decisions in this movie, I just don't think hold up as well, or they've found maybe ways that make, I don't know, more logical sense to do things like staging and stuff like that. I mean, there's a whole scene at the beginning where like Lee Marvin and John Vernon are right. They're like on the floor rolling around having a conversation, and it's like super strange and like doesn't make a lot of sense to me as to why they're down there and why this whole thing is kind of happening the way it does. And I know that there's like creative intent behind all of it, but I just feel like it doesn't really translate if you're watching it in, 2022, the same way that it would if you were watching it in the 60s. And, I just think that it was kind of a little strange. There are a few different strange decisions throughout the movie, similar to that really like, unfortunately pulled me out of it throughout the course of watching it. I mean, there are some amazing stuff in there. You talk about the scene where Lee Marvin's walking down the hall. I think if anybody hasn't seen it, but maybe seen a clip somewhere, like that's probably the clip they've seen. It's probably the most iconic, like kind of scene that I think would stand out to people and get reused other places. Like that's a cool scene, like the sound design and what's going on there. It's pretty neat, but there are other things throughout that I'm just like, what? Like, what is so strange? It's such a strange decision.
Yeah, well, 60s movies in general, we've talked about it before. Every decade has their style of filmmaking, right? Right. And the 60s in particular are so stylized because it's so drastic of a change. The late 60s into the early 70s of staging, the dialogue, physicality between people is a little awkward. And then you've got your zoom in, your 60s zooms.
Yep.
Of which I think this has a few. It's not overkill in this.
It does. It has one on the beach right before they dive into the water. And I'm like, it's so weird. Like it's such a random, that was random too. I was just like, okay. All right.
Yeah. I think, and that's kind of what I was referring to earlier with, this movie being a harder pill to swallow, I think, for modern audiences, because it's got that style is so different from today. Right. I recently watched the Thomas Crown Affair, the original. Yeah. That one is, I'm fine with 60s movies, but that one was very intense with its 60s isms.
Yeah.
Just visually. But David, what did you think? Did the visuals of the film, did that kind of bump you, or what did you think?
No, it's a little trippy kind of, or just a little surprising. I'm not used to the vocabulary of these 60s films, so to me it's like, oh, okay, yeah, these are some interesting choices, and they don't make sense until you like finish the entire film, I think, if you're not used to it, like, because you don't know if like you're just seeing random shit or if there's a consistency to it, or a cohesion between, even though it's like meant to sort of keep you thinking different things, because it's like there's essentially a linear story, but there's these odd asides and flashbacks and things that you don't, and then it takes on like a surreal quality. So I'm like, I didn't know if he was imagining certain things at a certain point, or like if this is all just a replay in his head, it's all a memory, like I'm not sure what I'm supposed to think about the whole thing, but that's what I thought was interesting. Like I was like particularly confused where after Lynn dies, and then he's in the house, and the house gets emptier and emptier, but then he's in the house, and then you see when he confronts the guy, however many days later with the delivery, the house is fully furnished. So I'm like, wait, so at what point did all this stuff happen? And is he mourning her at the end of the story? Is he did he take care of her affairs like after it was all said and done, or when did it? I was confused. Like, not that it didn't, but it didn't take me out of the story or anything. I think I like the idea that it's, you're not necessarily like, he went through a super specific trauma, and we're kind of just traumatized with him. Like, things don't necessarily make sense. And then now he's just this like brutal guy, and you don't really know anything about what his life was other than he was in love with her, and that he's willing to sort of be a criminal.
And then maybe he was some kind of sailor.
Right.
some
Yeah.
point.
Right. Yeah. With him
Which
and
is
the sailor
or-
prince.
maybe the weirdest scene in the movie for me.
Yeah, or he likes to hang out on docks with a bunch of other sailor type guys
Yeah.
surrounding young women. That was
and just
weird.
awkwardly smiling and standing
smiling.
too close, and
She
it
seemed
was-
totally fine with it, like
Yeah.
not alarmed at all.
yeah,
I watched that twice specifically to just be like, what's the vibe there? Because they're like, if the other guys weren't there and if played with the right music, that actually would have been just sort of a beautiful little
Sure.
scene of just like flirting with eyes and body language only, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than, but then they had a crowd that were all on his side, and it's weird.
Six other dudes making
Yeah.
it very off-putting.
Well, that's one of those weird things of the 60s that's just symbolic of his courtship of her, right? That's not, it all didn't happen in one moment like that. It's
Right,
just
right.
representing, where for some it happened in that area. It probably happened over time that he was able to, separate her from everybody else. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many interesting things about this one.
Hey. What's my last name?
What's my first name?
Let's talk about Lee Marvin in general, because I think when you understand his background, this movie gets a lot more interesting based on what his life experiences were to this point. And he's an extremely fascinating guy. For those, modern listeners who maybe don't know who Lee Marvin is, Lee Marvin was one of the legendary Hollywood tough guys out of the 50s and 60s, really. That he was he started as more of a character actor and then became a lead, but was always kind of what you see here in this movie is real tough guy, Clint Eastwood type, right? A Telly Savalas kind of style, Charles Bronson kind of dude, and was just Robert Mitchum is another guy who was a little bit earlier, maybe 40s and 50s for Mitchum, but that kind of like a quote unquote man's man. And going back to his beginnings, he was born in 1922 in Peekskill, New York, which was around the corner from me.
Wow.
I wasn't around in 1922, but we share a kinship there. So
Must be why you're so tough, John.
exactly, yeah.
That's where all the tough guys come from.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Peekskill, New York. That's it. But he was a first cousin 4 times removed of General Robert E. Lee.
Oh,
Interesting.
That's interesting.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He got into hunting when he was young, and he was always kind of a troublemaker in school, and I think he was expelled at one point, but there was always problems kind of followed Lee, or Lee, found problems wherever he went. He joins the Marines in 1942, and he becomes a sniper in World War II. Now, his job, he was the guy that they dropped behind enemy lines, and he would scout and report back where they were, and then he would start taking people out on his route back to the US
Yeah.
lines, right?
That's intense, man. Like
Yeah,
you've got to be tough. You
have to survive. You have to
Yeah.
you're completely on your own, and that's a crazy situation. But he was in the attack on Mount, I'm going to mispronounce this, but Topacho in Spain, where almost his entire company was like slaughtered, and he saw all of his friends get brutally, anything in war is brutal, and all sorts of, grotesque killings happening all around him. He gets shot twice. First, he gets shot in the sciatic nerve, severs his sciatic nerve.
Jeez.
But he keeps going, right? And then later he's shot again in the foot by another sniper. So he's shot twice, is one of just a few people who survived that attack. And was just, obviously the trauma of all of that is going to affect you, and you're going to have psychological, as we've seen with a lot of people coming back from war, a lot of psychological issues. And now he's got a lot of physical issues, that he's in mental anguish, he's in physical pain all the time. So he ends up, by the time his military career is over, he's discharged as a as a private first class. He was a corporal in the war, and he had been demoted because of all the trouble he constantly caused. Like he would get drunk and get in fights and just get in, stir up trouble wherever he went. He was extremely highly decorated. He was given 7 medals for his service in the war, and it's like including the Purple Heart and Navy Commendation Medal, Combat Action Ribbon, Presidential Unit Citation, American Campaign Medal, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, and World War II Victory Medal. So, I mean, the dude's like loaded with honors, but yet he's booted out as a private.
Sounds like a lot of participation trophies to me. Just kidding. I honor the military. I have no problem. Just I'm just being an asshole. Sorry. Thanks.
David's trying to get us canceled.
Yeah. Cancel us.
It's impossible.
I subtly try to just put in, really inflammatory things, and then hopefully someone on Twitter will discover it, cancel the show, and then I'm out of my contract for this podcast.
That's what it's all about. David trying to get out of his deal.
Yeah. I've been since day one. Until I got the deal, I wanted it. Once I got the deal, I wanted out.
Yeah. Well, if anybody's listened to the podcast before, they know that John and I both have family members that serve in the military and that we respect them.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. I was making a overtly terrible.
That's my counter cancel.
There you go.
So now that he's back out of the military, what a problem that a lot of post-military servicemen have is, what are you going to do now? So he had kind of gotten into acting a little bit in his pre-war career, so he goes back to it. He gets involved in theater and TV throughout the very early part of the 50s, and he just starts working the system and trying to get better parts and better parts. He, by the end of the 50s and early 60s, he'd actually shown up as a villain in 3 John Wayne movies. One of which is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which is one of my all-time favorite westerns. It's a fantastic film. So his name he's starting to be more of a character actor that's known and, is getting himself established.
He's in The Killers too, right?
Yeah, The Killers is a huge movie for him with Ronald Reagan. Yeah. As the co-lead of that one. That's both versions of The Killers, which I think is I want to say it's like, I think there's a version in the late 40s and then the early 60s. I could be off on the years, but there's 2 and they're both really interesting. One's Burt Lancaster and one's Lee Marvin. So yeah, The Killers is a big movie. And then he does Cat Ballou, which is a musical really with Jane Fonda, and he wins an Oscar for it. So that's the movie that really makes him a star, that he's established himself. Now he's boosted up to the A-list. And then following that, he does The Professionals, which is a Western with Burt Lancaster, and then The Dirty Dozen. So by 1967 or going into 66, really, he's one of the top actors in Hollywood at the time. I mean, there's still probably John Wayne is still up there, but Paul Newman, Steve McQueen are right there. But Lee Marvin's, right floating near the top.
Right.
And but all during this time, lots of problems with alcohol, lots of problems with his, the woman he was married to at the time. And just, he would go out and just get like blackout drunk, like almost every night. But he was a professional. Like he always showed up on set the next day. And especially in the earlier part of his career, knew his lines and was on it. But so that's kind of where he's at. At the same time, let's talk about John Boorman, the other driving force of this film. John Boorman was in the British Army, but I don't think he actually saw any active duty. He did serve, but not in it would have been probably the Korean War for him. He gets into TV news and documentary filmmaking and starts doing some interesting films that are starting to get noticed. But he does one documentary, which is it's called Catch Us If You Can. It's basically a version of A Hard Day's Night, which was the Beatles' first film. But this is for the Dave Clark 5, and that gets him noticed by Pauline Kael, who was probably the #1 film critic of the 60s with the New Yorker.
Anybody listen to any of the Dave Clark 5?
I have. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a fan, like a huge fan or anything, but I have heard them.
Are they a pretty popular band? It's interesting to me that they
were then, weren't they?
They were then, yeah. In the 60s, yeah. So, I mean, that movie wasn't as successful as A Hard Day's Night, but it was critically well received.
Yeah.
So, you know, all these start to converge. Irwin Winkler, who is another iconic producer who did Goodfellas, Raging Bull, the Rocky movies, just it goes on and on and on. How many great films he produced. He starts developing the script, and it's based on a novel by Don Westlake called The Hunter. Have you guys read it? You guys haven't read any of those, right?
No,
I have not.
It's a series. The character's name is Parker in the books. It's Walker in the movie, but it's Parker in the novels, and it's like 24 novels.
Nice.
So it's a
series. It's
a whole series with this character that goes, you know, it's just sort of like case after case after case that he's gets himself wrapped up in. So they're developing the script. Winkler hires John Boorman, based on Pauline Kael's kind words about him and good reviews for him. So he goes out on a limb, hires this new kid basically, and he's targeting Lee Marvin, and he's trying to make a deal with Lee. So he sends Borman to the set of The Dirty Dozen to, you know, basically get Lee to commit to it. And the interesting thing is when they do get together, Lee Marvin hates the script and John Boorman goes, good, so do I. And they threw the script out completely.
Oh, wow.
And they formed a friendship that lasted for years and, you know, really just connected with each other. And Lee really needed a director he could trust. So Lee negotiates that he gets full script approval, full cast approval, and he gets final cut of the movie. And then in a meeting with all the studio executives and Winkler and everybody, he says right to them, he took the script that they had and he walked out and threw it out the window of this meeting, and then said, I'm signing over all of those rights to John Boorman. So on John Boorman's second movie, he's got all the final approvals on everything. He's got complete creative control of the movie, and there was basically nothing they could do about it.
That's amazing.
That's a great Hollywood story. Oh my God. It's a great story.
So fascinating.
Wow.
So, you know, I think just looking at Lee's life and knowing that context, seeing the movie, you know, seeing it maybe on your second viewing, it just puts it, I think, in a different place that you can understand why he would do a movie like this and why he would gravitate to such a rough character like this.
Yeah. Yeah, because this guy's a brutal guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even in The Dirty Dozen, he's a tough guy, but he's got heart in that movie. Here, he's almost like a heartless killer. You know, nobody has a heart really in this one.
Right.
No.
Well, Cinderella, I was beginning to think you'd never come for your shoe.
So, all right. So let's talk about just some of the rest of the cast. Angie Dickinson is Chris in this film, and they had one after Stella Stevens. Didn't work out with her, so they get Angie Dickinson, who also has a history with Lee Marvin. She was not a fan of him because she co-starred in The Killers, and Lee was pretty rough with her on that movie. And there's a story of something about him, not like at work, but some kind of after work situation. Things got out of hand, and he ends up holding her out a window, dangling her a few stories up.
Jesus.
Thinking,
okay.
I don't know, you know, what the real behind the scenes story was, but there was a lot of.
If there's any truth to that, I can understand why she's not a big fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of heat between really Angie towards Lee. Right. You know, Angie Dickinson was a huge star of the 60s and was one of the top actresses of the time, and this the scene in the film where she attacks him, like you can see she's really smacking him, and that's a lot of sort of her taking out her aggressions from their prior altercation on that scene, and Lee was just taking it, and apparently they did become really good friends after this film, and I think that probably helped,
mend the bridges.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, so it's so many interesting things going on with Lee here, and he was younger and I think more wild here. He's a little bit older and still drinking quite a bit, but in a lot of ways he's kind of more tame than he was 10 years prior.
Right.
So some of the other actors in this film, we've got Keenan Wynn, we've got Carol O'Connor, we've got the great John Vernon, who I think this was the first movie I had seen him in. Carol,
I think don't they even have something introduced? Is it on the front of this one?
Yeah,
introducing John Vernon.
I think he does. Yeah.
I mean, he'd been in some stuff prior to this, but
I mean, he's been on the show before with National Lampoon's Animal House.
Yes, in fact, he has.
And he's
which is probably the role that he's most recognized for.
Of course, Dean Wormer. Yeah. Or maybe Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Could be
also a classic.
Yeah.
I know some of our listeners will respond well to that one.
Oh, yeah. But he's got that kind of commanding, deep voice that he also did a lot of, voiceover work and I think had a huge career on that side of it as well. But I love John Vernon. I think he's great. He's fantastic in The Outlaw Josie Wales, if anyone hasn't seen that.
Yep.
Clint Eastwood Western. I'm not a big Clint Eastwood guy, but that one I like a lot.
Let me tell you something about corporations, Walker. This is a corporation. I'm an officer in a corporation. We deal in millions. We never see cash. I got about $11 in my pocket.
Carol O'Connor, who would, later be an iconic television actor with All in the Family. Very different kind of role for him here. Keenan Wynn was coming off of, he's been in a ton of Westerns and, he was in Dr. Strangelove also, but Once Upon a Time in the West he shows up in, and later he would show up on an excellent television series called Dallas. Brent's favorite show.
Someone's favorite. Someone who didn't grow up in Texas.
New Yorkers who love shows about Texas.
Where's his house?
We're here. This is it.
I said alone.
Take it easy. You'll last longer.
And then we've got Sharon Acker, who plays Lynn, which is Walker's wife and part of the love triangle here that's going on. So good actors but none really superstar names besides Lee Marvin.
Are you forgetting Michael Bell? Right? Isn't he from? Didn't he do G.I. Joe?
Is Michael Bell in this movie?
Michael Bell's in the movie. He plays one of the dudes in the.
He's
the
hotel. Second penthouse lobby guard.
Yeah, he's one. Of
course.
guards.
How could you forget that?
Duke himself, and you skipped right over it.
My favorite G.I. Joe is in this movie.
Yeah,
they're all
solid.
Here.
Shout out.
All the stars are here.
All the stars came out. Sid Haig, right?
Sid Haig, yeah, you can actually. I did recognize him. The very different looking Sid Haig from the horror movies. That the bald, goatee look that he had later on. Very different here. Clean shaven, full head of hair, much smaller in stature.
And James B. Sicking, right? Isn't that his name?
Yep, James B. Sicking, who is another guy who's in a million 80s and early 90s movies and TV shows. And there was a series he was the dad on.
Doogie Howser.
Was it Doogie? He was Doogie's dad. Yeah,
he was Dr. Hauser. Before there was the other Dr.
Hauser. So they shot this movie. They only shot in Alcatraz for 2 weeks. And this is only 3 years after Alcatraz actually shut down.
That's the craziest thing.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not like that far removed from it being an active prison.
Yeah.
And it was already a tourist attraction. That must have been in the plans when, I don't know anything about the history of Alcatraz in terms of that era when they shut it down. But it became a tourist attraction already, like within 3 years. That's kind of grotesque.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there's quite a fascination with Alcatraz. There was a lot of lore.
Yeah.
The Birdman of Alcatraz, like all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there has to be, I mean, it had to be creepy shooting in there. Like there's gotta be some ghosts floating around there.
There's gotta be ghosts.
Definitely. I like when they're on the boat going into the prison. The tour guide on the ferry is talking about the convict that escaped, and I'm like, oh man, you just mentioned you're not a fan of Clint Eastwood, but dude, I love Escape from Alcatraz, which is that story.
There are good Clint Eastwood movies.
There's a lot of good Clint Eastwood movies,
there is.
John.
I mean, I prefer
Sorry,
his older
John.
stuff. When I say I'm not a Clint Eastwood fan, it's like almost everything post Mystic River.
Oh.
Hey, Trouble with the Curve. I just watched that. That's pretty good.
Hey,
isn't that
Paint Your
reaction?
Wagon? Isn't Paint Your Wagon one of his? And that's Lee Marvin as well? Or Lee Marvin was in it?
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen Paint Your Wagon, but
it's like a music. It's also a Clint Eastwood musical, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But
Damn,
yeah,
you guys mentioned Sid Haig, and it just connected with me who Sid was. I was like, oh yeah,
you know him.
Yeah.
House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects. Yeah, I recognize him.
Yeah.
Twisted
I think
fella.
he just passed maybe a year or two ago, but
yeah, that sounds right.
But you know, it's so you can't duplicate a location like Alcatraz. There's something about its look. I mean, in any real prison, you know, you need to go there to really capture that energy. There's something about it doesn't sell as well when it's built on a stage. You can almost kind of tell that it's just not quite the real thing. But this has that, you know, it's authentic. It's got an authentic, really gritty look to it that they needed. And you know, just as a reminder, in case anyone needs a little refresher on what the plot of this movie is before we kind of get into those things. The Walker is part of is committing a robbery, and there's a transaction that's going to take place on Alcatraz where the money is going to change hands, and the deal is going to be made. And he is turned on by his best friend Mal and his wife Lynn, and he's shot and left for dead on Alcatraz. They leave him there, and we see him swimming away, and then we cut to however much time later. I think it's a year, maybe
about a year. They say later,
that he is back in San Francisco for revenge, and we follow him as he tries to get back his $93,000 that was stolen from him and avenge what happened to him. So that's the general plot of the movie. And I think that Alcatraz is such a, you know, symbolically, it's such a huge part of the movie, and you can't duplicate that. And there's, you know, a lot of great LA locations. There's, you know, they shot at LAX with the shot of like basically like Walker is coming, like that's those footsteps, those endless footsteps, is that his relentless pursuit of vengeance that overlays, like we see him walking and we cut to other scenes, but we keep hearing the footsteps over, and it's just methodical pace that just never ends until he shows up and, you know, bursts through a room with a gun. But really great locations between that walkway and the LA River Basin, and just, you know, the apartment complexes and the house, you know, the rich house at the end, towards the end of the movie. Just really good job just setting the tone. Now, let's talk about what's going on kind of thematically in the film. Do you guys think Walker actually is alive?
Yes.
I do. And it wasn't until after seeing the movie and doing some research that I ran across the whole theories of him possibly being dead or in some sort of, you know, sickly state of after being shot or whatever. But I think that that's really interesting, and it I think for me, like, makes the movie more interesting if he's not alive. But I think he is.
I think any movie that has the option of looking at it from that perspective of is this story actually happening? Is it a dream? Is it a fantasy? Is it real? I think it's always something really cool, that a cool aspect that certain movies have. This being one of them. What about you, David? Did you kind of buy into that? Was it really happening, or was this all a figment of a dying man's vision?
I think, I guess it's supposed to be an interpretation, right? But I mean, I'd like to think this all happened the way it played out. But I think he was having a hard time existing through it. I mean, that's like, I was like, maybe he is alive, and then when he went to the house to find Lynn, maybe that's it was empty to begin with, and maybe when we're seeing it empty, so maybe we're running through his fantasies while he's just running around trying to figure shit out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all a fantasy in his head. And I find that I do find, to have that sort of thought exercise about it, it really does up the sort of the quality of what you're watching, and the way the narrative is kind of playing out. So I would assume everything I'm seeing is happening as it played out, but we do get a peek inside his brain where he's reliving a lot of stuff. So
yeah. I mean, I tend to think that it's really happening, but this last time I watched it, I definitely tried to put that lens on of that he's a ghost of vengeance.
I just think it's like part of it is if he was in every single scene, I could buy, like, you could actually say like they were trying to be overt about it. And I know artistically you can't do that, but things happen where he's not around. So not much.
Well, it's kind of like, maybe it's kind of like the Wraith. Remember the Wraith?
Charlie Sheen, the Wraith?
That he is allowed back on this realm to seek vengeance, and whatever that means, whether it's eliminating everybody who wronged him, and then when that is done, he will ascend to his next form, right? Maybe that's happening here. Maybe there's a little of that.
Is the Wraith a movie that a lot of people saw? I feel like I bumped into it with dumb luck.
I feel like The Wraith is the #1 movie of 1986. I feel like that was #1 at the box office. Am I wrong on that?
Did it even go to the box office?
Did it
even in theaters?
Was it even in theaters? But The Wraith is a completely fascinating movie. I love The Wraith. It's early Charlie Sheen.
It's got kind of a Carrie vibe to it, kind of a
little bit.
It's interesting.
We'll cover The Wraith one day.
Or sorry, not Carrie, Christine.
Christine, yeah.
It's probably the one that I'm.
Maybe we'll cover The Wraith one day. It's in our wheelhouse.
Yeah, it is.
I bet loves The Wraith. I bet EK loves The Wraith.
Let's give EK a call and see if he wants to do another guest.
Oh yeah, we're already our lawyers are negotiating.
We're already in discussions. Great.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah. I mean, Halloween's right around the corner, guys. So
it's a good point.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like a scary movie.
Yeah.
He likes horror movies. Anyhow, yeah, I think so. I was trying to watch it through that lens of maybe he's not really alive. He's alive in the context of what we're seeing, but maybe once he achieves his goal, that's it. He's going to be gone, and the 93,000 is like symbolic of his his vengeance. So
this is where M. Night got his idea for Sixth Sense.
Yes, this is exactly it. This is it's almost a prequel,
except they don't reveal the twist in Point Blank, which is what makes it a little awkward. But 60s.
Yeah, they didn't spoon feed it to you in the 60s. You had to work for it.
Yeah, you did.
Sometimes you had to work a little too hard. But so and behind the scenes, this is a really cathartic movie for Lee Marvin. That this movie, knowing what we've learned about him, this is the movie where he's really, and the next one he does with Borman, which is Hell in the Pacific, that he really is trying to work out his dehumanization from his war experiences, and he's trying to find himself. So with that context, now obviously not your general audience isn't going to know that, but for film connoisseurs, watching this with that through that lens is, I think, makes this movie. I think it makes this movie a lot more interesting, and it already was interesting to begin with. But another, aspect that we see going on is this love triangle between Walker and Lynn and Mal, and it's symbolized in a couple of scenes. One is, the scene you mentioned, Brent, where Mal and Walker grew up together. I think they were like childhood friends, and they had reunited at I think like a high school reunion or something, is what that scene is. And they like tackle each other, and they're drunk, and Mal pulls Walker to the ground, and they're rolling around on top of each other, and Mal's begging for Walker's help. And there's a little more going on to that, and then we have a scene, and then it goes to this montage of the three of them, and their life together, of whatever they're scheming and doing together. But there's a scene in the car where Mal is driving, and Lynn's in the middle, and Walker's in the passenger seat, and they're taking sunglasses off each other and like moving it to each other's head, and that's just another reading between the lines of like what's going on with their relationship.
Right.
How do you guys feel about that? Was that bump you at all, or did that feel kind of natural to the story?
I mean, it all seemed a little awkward, but to me, like it's they're trying to portray that they had an open relationship, and then at a certain point, like she got more comfortable with the other guy, and that's why all this kind of went down a little bit the way it did.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they introduced that in the movie at all is kind of, I don't know. It's again, like I feel like you could introduce that in a current movie and there would be a better way to do it. Like it would make more sense. Like it leaves a lot of questions. Like it doesn't really serve the purpose of what it's trying to achieve. I don't feel like it just plants a seed and leaves it open and kind of unresolved in a way. And you're like, what the hell what's all right, cool. We're going to, now it's this, now this is a thing.
Yeah. I felt like it just didn't really fit with this kind of movie, and
it's a bit out of nowhere too.
Yeah, and it's a bit of the free love 60s kind of vibe there that does not exist in this movie.
Right.
So it's just out of nowhere that they go to that level. Totally, that they're friends, and there's nothing wrong with them having a relationship. It just doesn't fit for me in this film.
I agree.
We go like to see them, the movie is so harsh and violent, and to see that really huge contrast, it's almost too big of a contrast.
Yeah, from what we know about Lee Marvin and John Vernon's characters, they don't seem like the type of guys that would be in that kind of triangle. You know what I mean? Like it seems very out of place.
Yeah.
But like some other things in this movie, it's kind of shoehorned in.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I get like kind of pulled out,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and ultimately it doesn't last very long, before.
Right.
That's really told in flashback, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, all of it is, right? I mean, pretty much.
Well, yeah.
It has to be, because the movie starts with him rolling around on the ground in Alcatraz.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
So.
Which is where we have the idea of maybe this isn't real. Maybe this is all a dream.
Absolutely. That's where
he's shot and dying on the floor of a jail cell in Alcatraz, and this is all kind of a fictional part of his.
Absolutely. That's why I find that theory like super interesting, and I think if I were to ever go back and rewatch this, I would absolutely watch it from that perspective and see if it plays better for me. Which I feel like it might, because some of the things that I know that I got caught up on, I'm like, okay, if that's what's really happening, maybe it works.
Yeah.
But I don't know. To me, I think that it's just a grab it. trying to make some of the stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah, understandable. The the other theme of the film is betrayal, because that betrayal is like being done left and right and all over the place between all sorts of versions of these characters. You've got Lynn and Mal turning on Walker. You've got this whole connection between the criminal organization with Yost and Fairfax and Brewster, and they're all sort of turning on each other by the end as well. And then you have Chris turning on Mal, which is Angie Dickinson turning on John Vernon later in the movie, or set up really. And then we've got earlier in the film we have Carter and the assassin, which is James B. Sicking. Sicking ends up assassinating Carter instead of assassinating Walker, and there's a lot of characters, and nobody's truly loyal to each other, which I think was one of the strong points of the movie, is that you can't trust anybody, and Walker doesn't trust anybody, and he uses their own greed against each other.
Right.
Yeah, and the organization, because that's what it's called. It's called the organization that he was kind of working. Very creative name.
Very creative.
They're like, it's a complicated group that we never really get too many answers. There's some kind of criminal organization that, he's trying to reclaim his 93,000, and he's going to start with Lynn and then go to Mal and then go up the chain until he gets that 93,000 back. He doesn't care who he has to work through. When he meets up with Carter, who is played by Lloyd Bachner, who is the father of Hart Bachner, who plays Ellis in Die Hard. Little trivia there. Like the whole scene where he goes to Carter, and Carter's basically like, well, you can't, like, I can't give it to you. It's like you're in the corporate ladder. You can't actually get what you want from me. I don't actually handle cash. But Walker forces it and just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing. He's like, well, where do I go? Who has my money? Like, and he's like legitimately asking that. And then it ends up in that great scene in the LA River Basin where Carter is trying to set up Walker to be assassinated by James Sicking, and Walker is able to re-maneuver it so that Carter is the one who runs out and is forced to run out in the open, and he's the one who's shot and killed.
He is the smartest man in the world, and they don't have to show how good he is. Like, he just does it all. Like, he's 2 steps ahead for every situation. He's got to like surmount challenges, but we don't see him figuring out. We just see the end result of his planning, and he's not like Mr. Cool about it. He's just doing it because he just is like a high speed, violent force, just kind of plowing through every challenge,
But that's what makes him cool, though. That's like part of the Lee Marvin thing of like why he was so cool at the time.
But I mean, like, he's not. It's not that show offy kind of cool you'd see later in the 80s and 90s with like, look at how good he is at everything.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
No, this is just like
John Travolta.
Nicolas exactly. Cage. So this is like, this is your dad just fucking fixing the car on the side of the road in 110 heat with just like his leather belt and a roll of quarters, and you're like, oh my god, how did you do that? He just does it like, oh god. So
well, that's the thing, is that you buy Lee Marvin as this character. He doesn't have to try very hard to make this believable.
Lee Marvin, like the shape of his face and his features, like this is an old school man. Like, this is a Hollywood man. This is a man.
He's like tough as nails, used to chew glass for breakfast. Like,
and actually did.
Had scotch in his cereal. Like, I mean, this guy's just intense.
He take one look at me.
Are you saying you don't have that?
I mean, yeah, until sobriety. But
the guys like him and Robert Mitchum, who were probably considered, two, like in the top 5 of legit Hollywood tough guys. They were not traditionally handsome leading men.
No, I mean, yeah, they have their own look.
And they played into that look, and they played those kind of characters, and that was their corner of the market. They're not going to compete with like a Paul Newman and a Steve McQueen in a way, because they who have the looks and aren't going to play as the same kind of tough guy that a Lee Marvin's going to play.
It always fascinates me, like the acting profession. It draws all sorts of types, right? But it's like you never expect Lee Marvin to be like, I just want to sing and dance.
Yeah,
I know.
But he wins an Oscar for that.
Exactly, right. Like, or just even like Gene Kelly, who was like a professional baseball player who's on his way, and then he becomes a dancer, and then he becomes a amazing singer dancer.
Yeah.
And like and Gene Kelly's like, he's just a man, like, to me, like, just I don't know. And so it's always funny that there's like, so when you have like your Steve McQueens and your Lee Marvins and stuff like that, and it's just like, wow, these are men, and like they want to act, and it's like, what's drawing them toward? But again, it draws all sorts. Acting doesn't belong to any one type of person, clearly, but it's just it's easy to fall into stereotypes. But when you look at like this old Hollywood stuff, like, you don't see tons of guys that look like this today. Like, there are those character guys, and there are those manly guys.
No, because you got to look good on a poster now.
Yeah, exactly. So it is like, I don't know. So I'm just noting.
I can't think of, like, you look at everybody that's in the Avengers movie, the Marvel movies, like, they're all beautiful and attractive people, even when they're made up as aliens or whatever. They're they're beautiful people. So you don't have these kind of chiseled, really rough looking faces like a Lee Marvin anymore.
But like Lee Marvin, he's got to be what, 6'4", like, or he just seems like a giant. I mean, I don't know how tall he is, but like, you look at the costumes from, like, say, a Marvel movie when you go to the ArcLight or whatever, and they look like these little tiny little costumes, and you're like, and those guys are all cut and they look like that superhero body, but like they're still like small, I guess, in the scheme of things,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like Lee Marvin would come in and just like pop him right in the kisser.
I feel like back in the day, tough guys were actually tough guys.
Yeah.
When they portrayed them, they really were tough as well.
It's because they were like, look at him. He was absolutely a tough guy who happened to also be an actor.
I mean, I still think there's a couple guys out there that do that. Like, I don't know if it's true or not, but I think Jason Statham's probably a pretty tough dude. But
sure. Yeah, no, he's not a song and dance man.
No, like, I'm not trying to take a right hook from Jason Statham. I'm like, all right, guy, you got whatever you want, man.
I mean, you can't. Yeah, it's not like all these good-looking people today are just pretty boys. There's some tough people out there, right? I don't know.
Yeah, some of them are just pretty boys though, but that's fine. Like, they're great. Like, they're like, dude, they do great work. Like,
they're thespians.
If I had to survive like a nuclear winter, like, I don't know. Lee Marvin's the guy I want.
Sure.
Like, I want that dude. He's the guy who had to sit out there on the other side of the line in World War II and like make it back, by himself. Like, that's the dude I want.
Well, like, go ahead,
David.
No, I was gonna say, and like, but then you hear the story of what he did to Angie Dickinson. So he's
for sure.
There's that hard edge where he's, being a piece of garbage at some point to people. That doesn't define him or whatever. But like, okay, that's a story you wouldn't hear. Like Chris Evans did that to, or any modern actor. You wouldn't hear those stories of like true visceral danger to their coworkers.
You can't do anything like that.
Rightfully so, but like
you end up in court like Johnny Depp and Amanda Heard.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. Anyway, you were saying, John?
No, and then you look at Lee's career, and the peak is really 65 to 67, and he really didn't take to the whole Hollywood thing. He just, I don't think he wanted to keep up with it. I don't think he wanted to be a big star, like look at Clint Eastwood, who was on the rise at this point, and McQueen. That I don't think he wanted it, the publicity and the nonstop, promotional tours, pushing these movies. I think he wanted to act and he wanted to drink, really. And you look at his career path after this, and it's almost a straight kind of downward slide until he eventually passed in, was it 1987 or 89 when he eventually passes. But
87.
Yeah. The Delta Force was like his last, decent level movie. And
it was the last movie he did.
Was that the very last one? Yeah.
Delta Force in 86.
I mean, obviously it's almost 20 years after this, but he just looks worn out by that point. He's not doing a lot in the Delta Force. He's the commander, but he's got like he's like the guy talking into the walkie giving orders. Like you don't see him running around knocking people out anymore. But
the funny thing is Lee Marvin is basically is our age at the time of filming this movie, but he was a war
31?
veteran. 41
31.
Oh yeah, right, because you're 31. But like
I just turned it.
He's a hardened veteran who drinks and probably smokes like everybody, and so he still looks like oh, that's my dad, but like he's literally my age, more or less, like
right,
like oh, that's my peer. I would have went to grade school with that guy, like holy crap.
But getting back to Point Blank, the David, you mentioned it earlier. The nonlinear storytelling was, became a tool of the 60s and 70s, and then kind of comes back with, we talked about with Tarantino making that such a huge, a huge storytelling element, in the 90s. But it kind of goes away for a while. But here we see it. We see like flashes of, you're watching one scene, but it's flashing to others, and you're trying to, really follow that timeline. You're going sort of reverse order at some points, and it's it's not as smoothly done here as it is later with your Pulp Fictions and the modern usage of it.
Right.
Did that kind of bother you guys? Did it just kind of jump you out of the movie a little bit?
Nah.
I mean, I think for me, it's part of the reason I struggled a little bit. I mean, like I'm used to that kind of nonlinear storytelling, but again, like this is, I feel like it's kind of unpolished and it's a little dirty and broken. Whereas like a lot of the nonlinear storytelling you get these days is very like polished and on point. I mean, at least the movies that I'm seeing, I'm sure there's really bad ones still out there. And even some of the ones that are supposed to be good, I guess, are pretty bad. I think Tenet is one that's recently come out that was like a little rough for me with this nonlinear storytelling.
That was like, well, it's with Nolan, it can be overkill.
Yeah, but that I think just got in its way. Like it was just a confusing story to try and maintain. Whereas like this one, I feel like just as unpolished in a way that like it doesn't quite connect the way that it needs to connect for it really to feel like a succinct story at the end.
I think it seems that's got to be the point, right? It's just like, it's nothing. I think you're supposed to either sort of be have some sort of anxiety for what's going on. Like, is he because he's this violent guy and he's got his mission, but then like he's going through some stuff at different points and reliving sort of the horrors of his trauma. And I don't think it's like, you're not necessarily fooled by it. Like, oh, here's the trick, I think you're meant to just be like, what's going on with this guy? I think it's really it's purposely not clean to sort of keep you like, I don't know, guessing, or keep you sort of, I don't know, not guessing, keep you like uneasy about what's going on. I don't know.
Yeah. And the big scene where we see it kind of in an intense way is after he Walker makes his first real lunge at revenge when he's back and he breaks into forces his way into Lynn's apartment, right? And hoping that Mal's there, and he just bursts through the door and just goes right into the bedroom and like unloads on
guns ablazing
the pillow, right? And of course Mal is gone, and then Lynn kind of walks him through, like catches him up of everything he's missed, really, that Mal and her didn't really work out, and she's feeling, she's felt such awful feelings of guilt over turning on Walker, and she's gotten into drugs, or it's at least inferred that she's gotten into drugs, and then she overdoses like right there with him, and then we see this passage of time of we don't really know what he's doing, but each time it cuts around, her apartment is more and more bare. That I think, Brent, you mentioned earlier.
I think David brought that
David,
up.
yeah. Credit to David.
Thank you.
So, how is like the logic of that? Like, you kind of have to just not go that way, because where did the furniture go? How did he get it? What happened to her body? Like, where did it go? I don't think the specific answers really matter that much, but maybe it does. But that can be something that really bugs somebody watching it, is that, you need to have that decisiveness. Whereas here, it's just more symbolic that he's kind of cleansing and getting rid of his past life and building his plan to move forward and act, do his acts of vengeance. So
yeah, I think for me the thing is like, for any nonlinear kind of storytelling, like eventually you need the connective tissue to be revealed, right? So that it all kind of fits together and becomes clear and makes sense. And that's the thing that I feel like, not that this was like so far out there, but like there were just like there were so many like pieces left without the connective tissue, no explanation. It's just kind of a little like, it just seemed very discombobulated, just like kind of strewn together in a lot of ways. And, like, I mean, to David's point, I think it's valid. Maybe that adds to the anxiety or angst of the viewer, similar to what Lee Marvin is going through, you assume. And so, I mean, I think that's definitely an interesting way to look at it. But for me, still, like any nonlinear storytelling, you need that connective tissue to kind of pull it all together at the end. And I don't know, like maybe this is just, again, it's earlier filmmaking. It's the 60s, like they're piecing things together still, experimenting with stuff. This seemed very experimental in a lot of ways.
Well,
and kind of, experimental in a way that like it reminded me, and this is not meant to be a dig, but kind of like a student project type thing, like where you're just kind of throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and like trying to make it interesting, and you have some cool set pieces. But then when you get it finally cut together, like you've got a full movie, but you don't have a full story. And it's like, okay, well, it's good. It's, like it still works. Well, so we'll go with it.
Remember, this is basically a first-time filmmaker,
right,
who has final cut, who has complete creative control. So
yeah,
Borman is doing, and there were, I think Lee Marvin was driving a lot of the creative too.
Sure.
More from an acting perspective, not necessarily an editorial, but
right.
So you have to factor that in, that this is this guy's first real, actual scripted film rather than documentary. And so I think that I don't think you're off base in saying that
yeah,
so much of even directors that we love, their first movie or two feel very young, because
they're still learning the craft and figuring out the nuance and
right,
and like the important connective pieces that oftentimes is like second unit stuff that doesn't really get cross their plate, but you got to think of all of it, because at the end, like, you need a cohesive piece to put together, and it just felt like pieces were missing. But again, I think there are moments in there that are pretty stellar. But
one moment that I felt was less than stellar that bumped me was with when he finally confronts Mal. Now you would think traditionally the confrontation with Mal would be the ultimate, thing that the whole movie builds to at the end, right? But no, like maybe halfway through the movie they have their confrontation, and he uses Chris, which is Angie Dickinson, who is Lynn's sister, that he uses her to basically distract Mal while Walker gets into the apartment. And they have this scene where Mal is naked, post-coital with Chris, and he's wrapped up in a sheet and is pushed over a balcony, and the sheet unravels, and this really, of its time, like what would be a digital shot now of him falling to his death. And it's really it's one of those, old school films with their trying to do
it was like a rear projection.
He's like spinning away from it just doesn't look right. So that was an unfortunate moment that took me out. But for me personally, not a lot of moments in this movie. This movie does that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then meeting up with Carol O'Connor and he's Brewster, right? Yeah, he's Brewster.
He's Brewster,
yeah, and his rich kind of fancy. I don't know if that's Beverly Hills, somewhere in the hills, Los Angeles home.
Yeah.
That house is so 60s, like the wood I mean, it's like pre-80s wood, kind of wood paneling, and the carpet and the just everything is really so 60s. I love it. I love that house. I just wanted to move in.
A lot of the locations are pretty cool like that. Like just kind of watching through, like I've found myself interested in the locations quite a bit.
Yeah. And Brewster's another character who's Walker's going up the ranks until he gets what he wants, and Brewster is maybe the top guy, but there's also this mysterious Fairfax character that we don't really see. And he's trying to talk Walker out of it, and it's just a good acting where Walker is just like, so he's like, but I want my money. Like, I don't care. Somebody's got my money. Who's going to give it to me? Like the way Lee Marvin performs in that scene is just, I think, just total genius.
Yeah.
You threaten a financial structure like this for $93,000? No, Walker, I don't believe you. What do you really want?
I really want my money.
And then, one of my favorite scenes in this movie is I forget the character's name now, damn it. It's the car salesman.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that scene I really enjoyed, where he's just like
tortures him with the car.
Yeah, ramming the car into the pylons of the overpass.
That's probably that what he's doing is that's probably below the 6th Street Bridge.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which just got rebuilt. It was torn down and rebuilt, and it's already been shut down again because.
Oh really?
Yeah, there's like a lot of riffraff happening on it. So
yeah, I saw a bunch of clips the other day there's like people jumping out and walking.
Yeah, like racing and
there's all sorts of stuff happening there.
Yeah. But the 6th Street Bridge is a super famous shooting location in LA. That's like that picturesque over the LA River.
Yeah.
Right there. And it was I've shot there so many times. But anyway, yeah. But the car salesman, that was
I love that
just
scene.
beats him up via car crashing over and over and over.
Yeah.
And he's putting his seatbelt on. The car salesman's like, "Oh yeah, you won't need that."
Yeah.
I love it.
Is the real quick, because you guys would know this, in the LA River Basin, where that place where he comes out, and which we've seen in countless shows. I'm assuming that's like the one place anyone's allowed to shoot, more or less. Like there's no better visual, it's probably logistical place.
Right. It's the easiest to film at because it's the most picturesque. there's plenty of parking right in that spot. Like there just happens to be, good places to put your trucks and your crew parking, and there's just a lot of convenient like warehouse type buildings that you can use. And you're also like, nobody drives through there. So you have it completely to yourself. It's very private.
Yeah, I've seen, so many times that long tunnel and just where it spills out, and you see the other bridges, and I'm like, oh my God, like I get it, it's iconic. But it's always the same, it's the same location. It's like you can't hide it, that it's like a different part of the LA River.
Well, and they had to tear that bridge down because it actually, the concrete, I forget what the name of it is, but the concrete actually got like a disease.
Oh, really?
Like there was like a fungus type thing that got into the concrete, and the concrete was wearing away.
Really?
So wow. Which is, it's a real thing. So they like had to, I mean, that was a big inconvenience to take that bridge down and then rebuild it, but they really didn't have a choice. It wasn't safe anymore. So,
right. Wow. Well, always pay for good inspectors, everybody.
Yeah.
If we're taking one lesson away from this whole podcast,
that's the one.
Pay for an inspector.
And then by the end of the film, we are back at Alcatraz and
the Rock.
Yeah, the Rock. And,
welcome to the Rock.
So we're back there, and Brewster reveals that Keenan Wynn's character, who is named Yost, who was sort of guiding. He was a mysterious character who was sort of guiding Walker and helping him along the way. He's revealed as actually being Fairfax. So he's the head of the organization who's basically using Walker. That's the reveal, is that he's using Walker as a way to get rid of all the guys underneath him who have any kind of claim on his throne. So he can take full control of the organization.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like,
it's a cool reveal, right?
Yeah, I really like. Yeah, seeing this movie for the first time, I'm like, ooh, that's great. This guy's a genius.
And it all comes together where it started. So you've got the symbolic ending of that. He's back in this tomb, and he's come to get that's where he's finally going to get his money. But where it ends, it's ambiguous. That, does he get it? Like the last time we see Walker, he's just like, Brewster has been shot and reveals that Yost is actually Fairfax, and Fairfax kind of, does the villain thing of explaining the plan. And we just see Walker kind of fade back into the darkness, and the money's still out there. And that's it. We don't know what happens after that.
Yeah. Maybe off screen, Walker fades into nothing because he's a ghost.
Right.
And maybe that would mean Fairfax is like a guardian angel or the Holy Spirit or Jesus Christ. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Any of these are valid theories.
Yeah. And that if he is a ghost, there was no vengeance to be had. He was being used
by the Lord.
Yes.
Right. So, but at the beginning of the movie, we said we thought he was living.
Wait, right. So that's the thing.
I'm just saying, if that's the way you want to go. If you want to go living, then logistically, like, what happens? Does he get the money? How does he get off the island? How does he get off Alcatraz this time? He's going to swim again?
I mean, he got off Alcatraz before and he was shot, so he's no problem.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Did he ever leave Alcatraz? But no, like, I mean, if they took a boat together, there should be a boat for him to take it.
True.
With Brewster. It doesn't really matter, but it's like, there should be a way off this time.
I'll just wait for the next tour guide and just hop on that
to blend
in the morning. Just be like,
we see him post credits in Bermuda shorts and like a cargo shirt and like
fedora, like a straw fedora.
Yeah, and he's got a camera and like a pennant that says "Go Alcatraz." And he's just a tourist. He adopts a Southern accent. like, you know, he's or an out of state accent, like,
Right.
you know, like,
You know, so the best tour guide I've ever seen for Alcatraz is definitely Phil Hartman from So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, great,
I don't remember.
great scene.
I don't remember that scene. I did see
Yeah.
that movie back in '94 or whatever,
Yeah.
but I
That's
don't remember that.
I need to watch that movie again.
Yeah,
Phil Hartman, man, I miss that guy.
Oh,
Phil Hartman.
We'll do a side cast about Phil, but
I cried in May of 1998.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it was
God.
sad.
Yeah, I was driving when I found out, and I had to pull over, and it was just awful.
I was dying.
Him and Robin Williams, man, both of those. When I got when the news came through, I was like, shit, dude.
Yeah,
that's fucking bummer.
You know, and breaking news while we're just talking about actors that have passed, that I feel like we've been talking so much about actors that have passed.
Yeah.
With our Ray Liotta episode and Goodfellas and James Caan and Rollerball, but we found out as we record this today that Nichelle Nichols had passed, who was Uhura in Star Trek, and Paul Sorvino had passed last week, also from Goodfellas. David Warner from The Omen passed away. Just it feels like every day there's people going, and you know, RIP to all of them, and we'll try to work all of them into the show if we haven't already. So anyway, that has nothing to do with Point Blank, but yeah, I really love that ending. I like, you guys know me and how much I like those dark kind of endings of the 70s, and I think this is one of those that it's ambiguous, like what happens next. If does he get the money, does he get away? It's sort of like the money doesn't represent now what he thought it did, so is it worth anything to him? Because it's really not about the money, like it's about it being his property,
right?
So I don't know, who knows what happens next, but you know, there were 23 other novels that happened, none of which I've read. And there's a bunch of other films that have used this character, but none of them are straight sequels to each other. They're all either retellings of the same story or other based on other books in the series, but it's never been an actual true film series.
Right.
Would have been interesting if you know, they carried it on like what Dirty Harry did for Clint Eastwood. I wonder if they had made more of these, if Lee Marvin would have had that kind of reputation for the Walker character. Would have been interesting, but you know, Lee is like, I can't think of anybody better other than maybe Robert Mitchum to play this character. I think perfect casting for him.
Agreed.
Yeah, he was great. I mean, his performance is, I think, the strongest in the movie. I mean, they're all pretty good, but Lee was great.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're with him 95% of the time, and you know, his animalistic, like single-minded intensity is just so, I don't know, it's just like I was sucked up in his character in particular, and just like how intense is he going to be, and how aggressive is this guy going to get till he gets what he wants.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk a little. I think it's time to talk a little box office glory. Now, as we've talked about many times in this pre-Star Wars, box office wasn't really tracked the same way as it's been now, and there's not a lot of you know, hard information out there to find, but basically the film had a $2.5 million budget. It grossed $9 million, so that's not a crazy hit, but it's definitely a movie that made money and was a success. So so that's a win. It's
more than 93,000.
Exactly. So yeah,
Lee's happy.
It comes out August 30th, 1967. The top of the box office for 1967 was The Graduate and The Jungle Book.
Oh, wow.
So this probably is in the top 20, top 25 dollar wise, but yeah, not at the very tip top of it.
Was there a animated series developed after this? This
Point
movie?
Blank, the animated series.
Yeah, I feel like
there should have been. It was it was called Archer.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's
That plays.
I would love to see Walker with like an animated like turtle and wisecracking muskrat or something, hanging out and going to get taking cases,
like a
revenge.
Rocket Raccoon kind of sidekick.
Yeah, and or it's Walker in high school, like it's a prequel.
Yeah. They can have Michael Bell play Walker in the animated series.
He's got you gotta like Duke's voice. That's a good voice.
Love that guy. We did see other actors. Robert Duvall has played this character. I think the movie was called The Organization. In the kind of late part of the 70s. Not as I actually haven't seen that, so I can't really speak to it, but probably the most well-known retelling of the Walker story is the 1999 Brian Helgeland Mel Gibson film Payback.
Ooh,
which
is that right?
I saw Payback in the theater. I remember liking it, but I have since seen people just hate on that movie and just go on and on about how awful it is. But seeing Point Blank, which I saw afterwards, they're very similar. So I should check out Payback again sometime and see how it holds up and how it compares really to Point Blank.
I remember the buzz about it because it was like, oh, Mel Gibson's playing essentially a bad guy who just murders and rips shit up, right?
Yeah.
Like, wasn't that like the big idea? Like,
it's really the same. It's the same plot as this one.
Yeah, but I think they were like hinging on it's like, well, Mel Gibson's not. He's now like a straight up bad guy in a sense because he's just on a vengeance crusade. But so I think they were like, you're used to him being the comedic hero these last 6 years or whatever, and then anyway, I'm kind of interested to go see that. I remember wanting to see Payback back then, but I was banned from my local theater, so I couldn't.
You got into trouble at the theater.
I got a lot of trouble the year before. I forget what I saw a movie there in '98. What was that? Cuffs, maybe? Or was that '94?
Gotta be Cuffs.
I mean, I'm sure I've seen Payback, but like, it doesn't look familiar. I know
that poster. I know the back and forth.
The John Boorman said after he saw Payback that he said, "Oh, they must have found the script that Lee threw out the window."
Holy crap!
That's hilarious.
That's really good. That's a really good burn.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
I like that one.
Yeah. So I don't know. As I'm a big revenge movie fan, and to me, like this is probably my favorite revenge movie, just off the top of my head. I don't know. I really enjoy this film. It's 60s-ness and it's non-linear kind of issues and how it's aged aside. I still have a good time with this movie. It's peak Lee Marvin, and that's probably why I like it so much. This is if you're a Lee Marvin fan, if you like him in The Dirty Dozen and you like him in the other films that he did, like you have to at least see this movie. If not, you're probably going to enjoy it just for his own performance.
Okay,
that's fair.
Yeah, I get that.
I myself feel differently. I feel like this is not even the best revenge movie we've done a podcast on.
Well, go go for it. What?
I like Rolling Thunder more than I like this movie.
Yeah,
but
for sure, yeah.
But just from our recording sessions, but
which, by the way, if you haven't heard it, check it out in the archives, www.ReconCinemation.com/Rolling Thunder. I don't know.
I don't think
sure.
that part.
Or just find the link in there and click on it.
Yeah.
No, I think as far as revenge movies go, like I liked Rolling Thunder more than I like this, but I totally understand the draw for this, but for kind of all the reasons that I was stating earlier, like this one just doesn't connect with me as much.
Since I can't think of any other revenge movies, I'll probably just say I think I like this more than Rolling Thunder.
What about Hard to Kill? Steven Seagal. I mean, where do you rank that?
I mean, that's pretty dope.
Or the John Wick trilogy. I mean, if we're just going to throw revenge movies out there.
David loves his John Wick.
I know he does. He loves it so much.
I'm a freak. I should love it, and I don't.
Yeah, it is.
I should love it. That's right up my alley on paper.
Yeah, your severe dislike for it is interesting to me, but really you don't have to love it.
No, I don't. I don't really care that I don't like it. It's probably my biggest movie going surprise for me.
Have you seen all of them or just the first one?
I got through like almost 3/4 of the first one, and I'm like, I can't watch this anymore. This doesn't interest me.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
And we mentioned The Wraith, so maybe that's the greatest revenge movie.
I want to get on that.
Yeah.
I just want to watch Charlie Sheen movies, actually.
So. Yeah, David needs The Machine.
I need the machine. I want to watch The Arrival, that alien
comes
to Earth movie. That's pretty dope.
A little Men at Work.
Men at Work. I think that was on HBO this month.
Yeah, dude. Sheen-a-thon. Too bad there's not some catchy way we can twist a month into Martin Sheen. We'll work on it. We'll work on it.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out.
We'll take recommendations. Anybody have any recommendations? Just hit us up in the comments.
Machine May.
Maybe.
Sheen Timber. And then
maybe
get a little Terminal Velocity in there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Charlie Christmas. Charlie. I can't. Yeah. Well, we'll spitball.
We'll have to. Yeah. This is going to take the whole committee.
Sheenuary.
Sheenuary. That might be the best one yet.
There we go.
Oh God. Yeah, but The Wraith will be in there. So, yeah, I don't know. Interesting take on a revenge film. So, obviously we voiced our discrepancies of what we think is our personal favorites. But overall, I mean, how do you think it holds up today, though? We talked a bit about that 60s style, and it can be a hard pill to swallow for modern audience. I did try to watch this I use my older kids as the barometer for a lot of the movies we watch, and we were about halfway through, and I could tell like they were struggling. Like, you're just doing me a favor by sitting here and watching it, aren't you? And then something they had to actually do something, so they bailed out halfway through. But they were like, "Thank God that thing came up." And
they're like, "Mom, you want us to regrout the shower?" Yeah,
yeah. I can. I get the disinterest from the younger generation.
Yeah.
I think artistically, though, I enjoy this a lot more than I expected to, but I think it's I think it's pretty solid in terms of what it purports to be. And I like that that 60s, it's a little weird. There's this weird, like slightly weird elements, and not everything, I think. And the thing I didn't like was he ended up sleeping with Chris and I was just like, damn it, like it would have been, because it looked like she's doing psychological warfare on him in the kitchen and talking through the intercom. She is messing with him because she fundamentally doesn't agree with what he's doing. And like I was like, this is great. Like I really like that, because it's more him, knowing that he's gone through all this trauma. Like she's hitting him the way that she probably didn't even know how effective that was, to like come and get him. And but then it's like, and then they're physically fighting each other, and she she knocks him out, or almost concusses him, and then of course, like, because they're like so close together, like now they have to start kissing and then move to the bedroom. I was like, that's the darn.
Yeah, I agree that would have been better without that.
Yeah, she could have stayed with him or whatever, because then she's not in the story. Once it's like, here's what you're gonna do, she's gone. Like that, so it's like, of course he ends up with her. Like, but it's very 60s for that kind of shit. But,
Yeah.
Women are props and tools and
Yeah.
and objects of desire and whatever. But so yeah, the I loved that psychological warfare that Chris put on him. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, the use of women in the film is not good. Like that is an element that has aged poorly. I mean, Chris especially is almost used entirely as a sexual device, that Chris was sisters with Lynn, who's now dead, that Mal now has a crush on Chris, not crush, but he wants Chris. So Walker uses Chris to sleep with Mal as a distraction so he can get in there, which he does. And then she's angry at him, but then of course falls for him. So, not the best. That's a great moment where she's completely messing with him psychologically and physically.
Yeah.
But then it ends with, then they sleep together, and it just would have been stronger without that. But
yeah,
it's a product of its time.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes you can't deny the heat between two people.
Yeah.
But it is just sort of classic of that kind of era. Like,
yeah,
beautiful woman, rugged, sexy guy, whatever. They're going to end up together.
Yeah.
Anyway, but so the first time you and then also like at the car lot, like there's just a joke of like the sort of the sexy bombshell trying to buy a car.
Yep.
Stegman can't keep his eyes off her.
Yeah.
What kind of car are you looking for, friend? And he's just staring like,
yeah, it's so sleazy.
What are you in high school? Like, you can't, I don't know. It's just silly. Like, I don't know. But but we all roll our eyes at that kind of silliness of that time, and but other than that, I think the rest of the movie holds up pretty well.
Yeah. Well, and a great team up between Boorman and Lee Marvin that was beginning of a long friendship, and clearly they had a rhythm here, and it continues in their next film, which they go right into, called Hell in the Pacific, which is about a U.S. soldier and a Japanese soldier who are stuck on an island together. They both crash on an island and are stuck there together, and it's about their relationship with each other. Definitely another cathartic movie for Lee Marvin, processing his war experiences, but which I don't know if ultimately he really ever did. This movie in particular had a huge influence on Steven Soderbergh, that he refers to Point Blank as a crucial film in his upbringing, that in most of his movies he says he does something that harkens back to Point Blank. And I think you can see a lot of it in The Limey, which I haven't seen in a long time and I need to rewatch, but there's definitely parts of that call back to Point Blank. So, interesting that such a huge filmmaker now has had it feels like his roots are partially based in Point Blank.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
So it does, to some degree, it's had an impact and lasted over time.
Well, who knows what kind of movies we'd have if not for Point Blank.
Apparently, we wouldn't have any Soderbergh films. That's it.
He would have just become a carpenter.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, this was. I'm glad we got to look at this one. This one has been on my list for a really long time, and we scheduled this month-long vacation in Alcatraz for this August, so we figured this is the perfect time to take a look at Point Blank, and there's a whole slew of movies that we could cover for our next episode, but I'm just gonna let it linger there as a tease, and very soon we'll have our next edition of Alcatraz August. So what do you guys think? Any other notes on Point Blank or anything Alcatraz related? You got your sleeping bags?
Yeah,
we're going to be there for a month.
I'm ready.
So it's going to be a long month.
I'm pretty excited. I do love myself some some Alcatraz lore. So this is going to be an awesome month, guys.
We're doing the swimming challenge to Alcatraz, a month in Alcatraz, and then swim out.
Yeah. I'm gonna I brought a wetsuit because it's gonna be real cold. And then I'm ready.
And after that, we'll see where all the dogs go. When where do they go? They go to places. That's just a hint. I'm not saying what the movie is.
That sounds like a red herring, but okay.
It's all dogs go to heaven. That's what we're doing.
Oh, well, geez. Now that you said that, we can't do it.
No, I guess we can't do that one.
You spoiled it. So, but what about? Do they go to heaven too? Sequel
as well?
Let's just do.
Do they go to heaven also?
Oh God! All right. Well, great being back here with you guys, and looking forward to our next episode. If you want to catch any of our shows in our archives, we're at ReconCinemation.com, or check us out on social media. We're at ReconCinemation Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you to our friends E.K. Wimmer for the poster, or E.K. Wimmer for the theme music, and Curtis Moore for the poster. I guess we will see you guys next time on ReconCinemation.
Take care.
Bye now.
You let him fall. You should have killed him. You owed it to yourself.
Well, this money belonged to Sister. You better take it.
You died at Alcatraz, all right. Goodbye, Walker.
Bing.